All right, ready for another deep dive. Today we're tackling Energy Analysts, a career that's seriously on the rise. And we're using RoleCatcher.com. They've got it all, career guides, interview, prep the works. If you're thinking about sustainability and want a career with some real impact, you are in the right place.
What I find so interesting is how RoleCatcher shows us what an energy analyst really does, because it's so much more than just number crunching.
I was picturing someone with a solar panel tie clip, hunched over spreadsheets all day.
Yeah, and that's where it gets interesting. They really emphasize the problem-solving aspect of it, using those numbers to make buildings more efficient.
So it's more like detective work than data entry.
Exactly. Imagine you're evaluating a big office building. You're figuring out where they're losing energy, coming up with creative solutions to save money, and be more eco-friendly all at the same time.
Like a sustainability puzzle. But you've got to get the building owners on board with your recommendations too, right?
You've got it. And that's where the people skills come in. Explaining complex stuff in a way that anyone can understand is key.
So you're like an energy diplomat. RoleCatcher calls complex problem solving a crucial skill. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
It's really about weighing different solutions, finding what's actually doable, makes sense financially, and helps the client reach their goals.
Okay, so not your average desk job. RoleCatcher. Who do they say this job's a good fit for?
Well, they have a whole list of pros and cons. One of the biggest pros, high demand. This is a career that's only going to keep growing.
Job security is always a plus, but more demand means a lot of competition.
For sure. But here's the thing. RoleCatcher dives deeper and points out the impact this career has on sustainability. If you're passionate about the environment, that can be really motivating.
I bet. Okay, but long hours, they mention those too, so not exactly a 9 to 5.
Not always, no. It's the kind of career where you're driven by the desire to find solutions that benefit everyone, and that can mean putting in some extra time.
Sometimes it's more like a passion project, I'd imagine. I did have one question about their list of skills, though they've got reading comprehension as a top one, and I feel like that's a given, isn't it?
It's not just about reading. It's about taking in complex information. We're talking dense policy documents, technical reports, and pulling out the key points.
So more like information ninja skills.
Yes. Say you're prepping for a meeting. You've got to go through all these reports on new energy regulations and translate it into something anyone can understand. That takes serious reading comprehension.
Suddenly it doesn't seem so basic. RoleCatcher also maps out a whole career progression for energy analysts. I was particularly drawn to the senior energy analyst level, leading policy changes. Now that sounds high impact.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
You're not just advising on projects, you're looking at the big picture, maybe even working with the government to shape energy efficiency standards.
Now that's real-world impact. But to get to that level, you've got to nail the interview. And RoleCatcher's got a whole section on that too.
One question that really stood out to me was, can you explain the difference between energy conservation and energy efficiency?
I admit I hadn't really thought about the difference before.
Exactly. They want to see if you can think critically, not just give a textbook definition.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say someone's thinking, this is it, this is the career for me, but they don't come from a traditional background. What if they studied English, not engineering? Does RoleCatcher offer any hope?
While an engineering or environmental science background is definitely valuable, it's not the be-all and end-all. RoleCatcher points out some other ways in.
Like what?
Well, they mentioned the CEM certification, Certified Energy Manager. It shows employers you're serious about energy efficiency, that you understand the technical stuff. And then there's the LED certification. That one's about sustainable building.
So even without the degree, you can build credibility. What about experience, though?
Internships are a great way to start, or even volunteering with organizations focused on sustainability, energy consulting firms, local government initiatives, anything where you're analyzing energy use, researching solutions, that kind of thing.
So it's about building your own narrative.
And don't discount transferable skills. RoleCatcher actually emphasizes communication as much as technical expertise. If you've got a background where you've honed those communication skills, those problem-solving skills, don't downplay it.
This is all really exciting. RoleCatcher also talks about advancement in the field. Anything stand out to you in that section?
What resonated with me was their emphasis on continuous learning. This industry is constantly changing, so you're never really done learning, you know?
That makes a lot of sense. How do they suggest people stay up to date?
Attending conferences, participating in workshops, subscribing to industry publications, and joining professional organizations, they mention. You kind of have to become a sponge for all things energy.
Always learning, always adapting. which actually leads perfectly into a thought ahead.
I do love a good cliffhanger. What are you going to leave us hanging with?
Well, we've talked about how much the energy sector is changing, and RoleCatcher specifically mentions the shift towards renewable energy sources and energy-efficient solutions. So my question is, what does that mean for someone just starting out? What skills are going to be most valuable in the future of energy? That's something I'm going to need your help unpacking after a short break.
That's the question, isn't it? It's not enough to know today's tech, you got to be thinking years ahead. The whole energy landscape is changing so fast, and that means the important skills are changing too.
So what does that mean for someone who wants to be an energy analyst, trying to become an expert on the latest solar panel? Or is it more about understanding energy policy with this big push for net zero emissions I keep hearing about?
Let's define that real quick for anyone who's not totally familiar. Net zero emissions. It basically means we want to balance how much greenhouse gas we release with how much we remove from the atmosphere. Really important for fighting climate change.
Right, so it's bigger than just using less energy, it's switching to cleaner sources, which is where energy policy comes in.
Exactly. Governments, they have a huge influence on the energy sector. They set goals for renewable energy, offer incentives to be more energy efficient, regulate emissions from power plants, that whole thing.
So understanding those policies, how they're made, how they affect the energy sector, that's all going to be really important.
It's essential. But it goes deeper than that. You've got to look at how policy interacts with technology and what's happening in the market.
That's a lot to think about.
It definitely keeps things interesting. Just think about how much renewable energy is growing right now. Solar, wind power.
Which is great, but those sources aren't always reliable, are they? What happens when the sun's not out or the wind's not blowing?
Exactly. It's a big question. We call those intermittent sources, meaning they depend on the weather, so their output can be unpredictable.
So what's the solution?
Energy storage. Think of it as this giant battery for the entire grid. So when the sun's beaming and we've got more solar power than we need right now, we can store the extra. Then later, when the sun goes down, we use that stored energy, keep everything running smoothly.
That's amazing. So an energy analyst in that area, they'd have to understand not just renewables, but energy storage, how it all fits into the grid.
Right. Plus the economic side of it all. How much does each storage technology cost? What incentives are out there? How do you make it affordable? It's a complex problem, but a really important one.
Sounds like energy analysts have to be good at understanding the present and predicting the future.
And that's where those information ninja skills are so key. Being able to look at mountains of data, figure out the trends, make smart guesses about where the industry is going, that's going to be crucial.
So it's not just problem solving, it's being a bit of a futurist too. Starting to feel a little overwhelming even for someone who likes a challenge.
It's a lot to take in for sure, but you don't have to know absolutely everything. RoleCatcher actually talks about how specialized you can get within the field of energy analysis.
Oh, that's good to hear. So you can kind of focus your career on what interests you most.
You got it. Let's say you're a very technical person. You could focus on building energy simulations, using software to make virtual models of buildings, figure out how to maximize their energy efficiency.
That sounds so cool, like being an architect for energy efficiency. But someone who's more people-oriented, maybe they'd be into energy policy analysis.
Exactly. They could work with governments or advocacy groups, analyze different policies, help shape regulations to be more sustainable.
Or work with utility companies on adding more renewables to their grids.
Exactly. Or even dive into renewable energy finance, figuring out how to fund those big solar and wind projects, make them profitable and impactful.
So many possibilities. It's more like choosing an adventure than a job title.
I like that. And no matter what you choose, you're part of this larger movement towards a sustainable future.
That's what I find so inspiring about all of this. It's not just a job, it's a chance to make a real difference.
Couldn't agree more. RoleCatcher also had some interesting advice on professional development, by the way.
Yeah, what did they say about going beyond the certifications? What else can aspiring energy analysts do? So we've covered certifications, getting that real-world experience, but what about staying ahead once you're in the field? What did RoleCatcher have to say about that?
Networking. They really emphasize building relationships within the industry.
Yeah, makes sense. It's all about who you know, right?
It is, but it's also about what you learn from those connections. They specifically talked about going to industry conferences, joining professional groups like the Association of Energy Engineers, AEE, I think it was.
So it's like, don't just be an energy analyst. Be part of the whole energy analyst world.
Exactly. And that comes across in how RoleCatcher talks about this whole career path. It's more than just a job, it seems like.
Definitely. Reading a boring job description is one thing, but hearing about it like this with this much detail, it really changes your perspective.
For sure. It's not easy, no one's saying it is, but it's also incredibly rewarding. You're using your skills to work on something huge, creating a better energy future for everyone.
And that's something to get excited about. So to wrap up our Energy Analysts deep dive, what's the biggest thing you hope our listeners walk away with today?
That if they're passionate about sustainability, if they love a good challenge, if they want to be part of an industry that's constantly evolving, this could be the career for them.
It's not just a job, it's a calling. And on that note, we'll catch you all on our next deep dive into a new and exciting career path.